Okay, good morning, everyone. Go ahead and turn on your cameras. Go ahead and turn on your cameras and let's get started. So first of all, I know there are a couple of people in this section that have had some technical difficulties and are sort of joining us again for the first time in a week or so on their reconfigured computers. So congrats on that. And we have one person that's sort of dealing with technical issues today. I just saw that email. Do the best you can, and this is all being recorded and will be posted on Moodle for you to refer back to later. Last night, I finished my 1230 sections analysis essay drafts, which means that this afternoon, after office hours, I will begin commenting on your drafts. That means that sometime between today, tomorrow, and Saturday, I'll break it up over the 3 days, you should receive back from me your draft. If you sent me a Word document or a Pages document, I will send it back to you in an email with track changes. If you sent me a Google Doc link, I will reply back to your the email that you sent me that Google Doc link in, letting you know that the comments are available there for you. If you have any questions, or if you can't access the track changes, you should let me know that immediately. So first things first, for next class, because you're working on a major paper right now, there's no new writing assignment, there's no new reading assignment. No new writing or reading assignment for next class. So the most important thing is just that you continue working on your analysis draft. If my 1230 section is any indication of what the drafts will look like in this class, many of them are very good, but many of them are also incomplete. And that's okay to the extent that those students seem to have really taken the time to have fleshed out the work that they did complete, and it's of very high quality. But if that situation is similar to the one that you're in, I urge you not to wait to hear comments back from me. You should go ahead and begin working on the second half or the last synthesis paragraph, whatever it is that you need to complete. You should be working on that now. One thing I also want to say, just before we kind of get into the main lesson for today, is that proofreading is key. Proofreading is key. You should never be submitting anything to me or any instructor, and certainly not putting it out into the professional world, that you have not read over. There are just a lot of technical mistakes that I think even a quick skim of the student's work would have alerted the student to. So do be aware of that. Okay. Any other, let's see, I think that's all the announcements on my end. Any questions from anybody so far on the analysis essay, issues that you're having, that you're facing with your draft, anything like that we can cover before we jump into MLA citations? Okay, I will be on in office hours today from 2:15 to 3:15 on the office hours link. So you can come there as well to meet, to talk, touch base, to go over anything. I'm happy to do that. Today we begin sort of a transition into Unit 3. And I say this is a transition class because we're going to talk about MLA citations and works cited today. But that's actually something that you're going to use also in your Unit 2 paper, in the analysis draft that you have submitted thus far. It is certainly something that you will be using and utilizing on an almost daily basis as we move into the research unit. And as you begin compiling resources, as you will do in next week, and synthesizing all of that information into a research paper and into a works cited. So while the information we're going to cover today is not particularly exciting, and there's no way for us to have a robust literary conversation about it or anything like that, I urge you to pay attention and also to take notes. I am going to post the slides that we go over today on Moodle, but there's really no substituting just taking the best notes that you can as you go along, so you have sort of a quick reference point for all of this. A couple of things about MLA and about citations in general. One of the things that we used to have in this class was a book called the Longman Concise Companion, which amongst many things included an entire section on MLA citations, which was a wonderful resource for students to have a physical copy of in their hands while they were working on the research papers. The problem with that was the book was quite expensive and kept getting more expensive every semester. And they also kept updating the book, which meant that if you didn't have the newest edition or if you were getting a used copy, you weren't looking at the most recent information in the book. And that actually mattered here because in 2016, there was an update to MLA, the 8th edition. Also, because we're in an online environment right now, the book was kind of big and heavy and was going to be somewhat expensive to have shipped. So I decided to scratch the idea of having the book. Instead, what we're going to be using is the Purdue University MLA website, which is maintained by their English department and is outstanding. And today we're going to spend some time going over some slides that have actually been, for the most part, created by the Purdue English department that they've made available, publicly available for others to use in teaching MLA. And then I'm going to actually show you the Purdue OWL website where you will be able to find the information that you need as you're gathering sources to help you both with in-text citations and also with formulating your works cited, which will belong not only at the end of your analysis paper that's due 1 week from Monday, but then also for your research paper, which will be due, which will be your final assignment for this class and due, I think, on December 14th. Okay, so let's jump right in. First, let me just give you kind of an overview of what's on our Moodle page for today and how it corresponds with everything we're going to be covering. First, what you'll see here is an MLA citation guide and sample works cited. That is this. It is a PDF that includes numerous pages directly from the Purdue OWL website. It teaches you how to do basic things. This is sort of like a little mini version of the book you would have spent $80 or $85 buying. So you see here, MLA in-text citations, the basics. Gives you in-text citation rules, general guidelines, author page style, and I'm sort of skimming over these things because we're going to talk about them in depth in a moment. And then it lays out different kinds of in-text citations and all these little bold titles. In-text citations for a print source with a known author, for a print source by a corporate author, print sources with no known author, classic and literary works with multiple editions, these kinds of things, citing a work by multiple authors, multi-volume works, citing the Bible, citing indirect sources, citing transcripts, plays, or screenplays. There's a way to do that too, of course. Non-print sources from the internet. So you see all these different categories. Electronic sources. So anything that you find, this is where it gets particularly valuable for you all now. Again, since we're in a distance learning environment, you're not going to be going into the purchase library and collecting hard copy sources like you would have once been required to do. So most of your sources are going to come from online. So electronic sources, multiple citations, time-based media. So anything like videos, anything you find on YouTube, a movie, a TV show, a documentary you may watch. And then a works cited page, basic formatting, guidelines all through here, basic rules, etc., etc. So this moves through all of that. So this is all here for you. That's the first thing that's on Moodle. The second thing is this. It is a link to this website. Here you'll find, you can see all the way up there. Move that down. This is the owl.purdue.edu MLA formatting and style guide. And this is basically all the same information that I just showed you in the PDF. You'll find that this is also helpful for you for a number of reasons. We'll talk about it in a moment, but it also has other types of citation style guides, such as APA, the 7th edition, such as Chicago Style, the IEEE, the AMA, ASA, APA, 6th edition. And for those of you that don't know what those other things are, basically it's this. MLA is considered sort of the basic citation guide. It's used predominantly in the humanities and English and writing classes, any kind of course that would fall under the humanities. But other disciplines, other professions use different citation guides. We're going to use MLA in this class. And it's a good thing to really learn the ins and outs of MLA, because as you move into your majors, other disciplines, other professions, perhaps if you go to graduate school and you are studying law or something of that nature, and you're introduced to other citation guides, having a firm grounding in MLA and the kinds of technical components that go into any citation method will help you learn a new citation style. It's really that simple. All you have to kind of do is take the information that you currently possess, a sort of foundation with MLA, and then adapt it to whatever the new style is to those rules. The Purdue OWL website is a great place to be able to access information about them all. And you'll see here, style introduction, overview and workshop, formatting and style guide. There's all these different categories that will help you quickly go to the information that you need. In-text citations, formatting quotations, endnotes and footnotes, which you won't be doing in this class, but you may be doing in classes in the future. A works cited page, how to format a works cited page for books, for periodicals, for an electronic source, for other common sources. So if you have a source and it doesn't fall into one of these things, periodicals are of course newspapers, magazines, journals. If you have a source and it doesn't fall into any of those categories, look under other common sources. MLA abbreviations, things like editor, translated by, director, actor, performer, all those things fall under abbreviations that you would need to know here. You can also look at a sample works cited page. I have one for you right here. You can see what it looks like. You can also read a sample MLA paper. They have one for you with all kinds of little notations that will help you understand what you're looking at and why all the formatting matters. So this is going to essentially serve as our textbook for this, for our research section. So when you tell me, if you come to me and you say, I have this source and I don't know how to cite it, first thing I'm going to ask you is, have you looked it up on the Purdue OWL website? If the answer is no, then this is going to be the first thing that we do together. One question that I get from students all the time is, can I use one of these online citation formatting devices or applications? The answer is yes, but you have to be careful when you're using those kinds of resources, because sometimes they're wrong. And sometimes when you paste them into your paper, it does not provide the accurate formatting. And formatting matters for reasons that we're going to talk about later. The formatting matters. You are responsible for it. So you can't just use a citation creator, plop it into the paper and expect that it's all going to be okay. I still want you to have the know-how to be able to go through and spot check it manually and make sure that it's correct. Okay, any questions so far? These are the two things that are on Moodle for today that you will be using repeatedly. So please download the PDF, have it on your desktop, have it on your computer, print it out if you have a printer at home, so that it's a handy resource for you there. And then of course, maybe mark this link, add it as a favorite on your computer or on your toolbar or something, so that it's there for you quickly as you need it over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Okay. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. And let me just preface all this by saying, I know that this stuff is not very exciting. I remember sitting in class, learning about the same kinds of things and thinking, oh God, will this ever end? So I get it. I don't really know how to make it fun. I think it's important to just kind of address what it is and learn how to do it. That's what we're going to aim to do today. Please keep in mind that what we're going to cover today really represents the basics, the things that you absolutely must know to be able to do this well and to be able to put together a research paper that meets all the requirements, that has all the necessary in-text citations, and a works cited that will earn you a high grade, or when you get out into the real world, that will allow your work to be well received by your colleagues. There are lots of little idiosyncratic, strange things that you can come up with or come upon when you are conducting research. You may find a source that you think, gosh, how am I going to cite this? There can't possibly be a way to cite this, but there almost always is. The overarching guideline with MLA, and indeed with any of the formatting and style guides, is that the reader must be able to quickly and reasonably find the source that you are referring to. Either that you're referring to in your works cited, or if they're looking in the works cited and want to go to the source itself, they should be able to find it. And that is really the baseline for formatting any works cited entry. Can my reader find this information? So just quickly, what is MLA? MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. It is a formatting guide that's used in various humanities disciplines. In addition to the handbook, which is pictured here on the right, MLA also offers the MLA Style Center, which is a website that provides additional instruction and resources for writing and formatting academic papers. So you can visit the website there as well for more information on all of this. Basically, MLA dictates and regulates the following things: the format of the document, all of your in-text citations, and a works cited list. And we're going to cover each of those things this morning. So note, we are in the 8th edition of the handbook. If you are referring to any guideline that talks about the 7th, 6th, or anything before the 8th, it is outdated. Some of the rules are still the same and have not changed, but many of them have, particularly how we deal with any kind of online sources, electronic sources. So the 3 guiding principles of the MLA are listed down here. Cite simple traits that are shared by most works. That would include things such as author, title, volume, and edition information. The larger source, what they call the container of the source. Date, publishing information. Remember that there's more than one way to cite the same source in many situations, especially when you get into any kind of electronic sources and or media. There's more than one way to cite the same source depending on how you're using it and what you're trying to emphasize about that source. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And obviously to make your documentation useful to readers. So we're going to cover the big three things we talked about just a moment ago, basically how to format the papers, in-text citations, and then documenting sources in a works cited. First up, the basic rule that they say, and this is important to follow, always follow your instructor's guidelines. So where there are idiosyncrasies between what you find online and what I may require in this class, just always go with the instructor's guidelines. I have a few of those that we'll talk about as we come to them, but this is an important thing to note when you get or are working on any kind of assignment in your other classes and you're using MLA. If you have a question about how the instructor wants you to do certain things where there may be options in MLA, ask the instructor. Ask the instructor. If they're not crystal clear about it up front, just ask. Write the following things down, because I'm going to assume, after we talk about them right now, that you know them and that I will not ever have to address it again. An MLA paper should include the following things. It should be typed on white 8.5 by 11 paper. That is obviously not entirely relevant to us since you're not turning a hard copy right now, but for future reference, you should know that. Everything must be double spaced. Everything. The heading, the lines in the paragraphs, the works cited, everything must be double spaced. You must use 12-point Times New Roman font or similar. Times New Roman is best, it's the easiest to read. You must only leave one space after punctuation. So this means after you put a period at the end of the sentence, it's only one space before you capitalize the next letter, next word, and begin a new sentence. For those of us that learned how to type, and it's probably not anybody in here, a long time ago on typewriters, or even in the early days of computers, we used to put 2 spaces after a period. We don't do that anymore. You must set all margins on your paper to 1 inch on all sides. Your final research paper is going to require 5 to 7 pages. I've had students in the past adjust the margins to 1.5 inches, in some case 2 inches on all sides, so that their papers reach 7 pages, even though they look like some little strange column growing in the middle of the page, or floating in the middle of the page. No, 1 inch margins on all sides. You must indent the first line of every paragraph 1/2 inch. These are the absolute basics. And you must use them as a checklist and do all of these things, including on your analysis tracks. We're all on notice. Okay. An MLA paper should also have a header with page numbers located in the upper right-hand corner. You must use italics for the title of your paper. This says use italics for titles. That's referring to your title of your paper. How you format titles for different sources depends on a number of things, which we'll talk about, but use italics for your title. Do not underline your title. Do not bold it. You do not need an additional space after it. It should be double spaced, perfectly in line with everything else. And this last bullet point is not relevant to you in this class, but it may be in the future. You must place endnotes on a separate page before the list of works cited. Endnotes might be any kind of acknowledgements that you have. They're different than footnotes, of course. It might also be if you were writing a paper that needed some kind of visual aid, picture of a painting or of a photograph or of a sculpture or something of that nature. Those images might be included as endnotes. All right, this is continuing talking about just formatting the paper. Please note that there should be no title page. So don't turn in a paper that has a big page with lots of white space on it and a title and your name, no title page. Again, you must double space everything. And in the upper left-hand corner, you must include your name, your instructor's name, the course, and the date of submission, not the date you wrote it, but the date of submission. This is especially important for those of you that have been using your journal entries. You know, we had journal entry number 5, then we added to it in journal entry number 6. Then you took that and sort of added onto it for the first draft of your analysis essay. Some of you I noticed have never changed the title. Still says journal entry number 5. So make sure that all of that information is updated as well. You must center the paper title, use standard caps, but no underlining, italics, quote marks, or boldface. Well, you should use italics. This is incorrect. And then create a header in the upper right-hand corner at 1/2 inch from the top and 1 inch from the right of the page, which lists your last name and the page number. Which lists your last name and the page number. And the result of all of this should look like this. So you see up here, running header, last name, page number. Here's the paper header with the student name, the instructor, the course, the submission date, first line, title. Next line down, no extra space, begins the text of your paper. And it is indented 1/2 inch. Okay, that covers the basics of setting up your paper. Any questions about any of that? Okay, as you're taking notes now, just draw a little line and next write in-text citations. In-text citations, this is sort of like Roman numeral 2 in what we're going to cover today. A few of you have told me in conferences that you've never used MLA and you've never had to cite anything before in your high school work. So this is coming as entirely new to you. Others of you may be readily familiar with all of this, and it may be, a little bit of review. An in-text citation is a brief reference in the paper itself that indicates the source you consulted to get this information. That's all it is. In other words, the in-text citation leads your reader to the works cited so that they can find the full source. The in-text citation should be unobtrusive. It just provides the citation information without interrupting your own text. In general, the in-text citation will be the author's last name or an abbreviated title if the source has no author, with a space and then a page number enclosed in parentheses. Like this, open parenthesis, Wordsworth, 263, close parenthesis. And I want to note a couple of things about what you're seeing here. So you see this sentences. Romantic poetry is characterized by the, quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, end quote, space, open parenthesis, Wordsworth, which is the author's name, space, page number 263, close parenthesis, period. So first of all, note there's no comma between the author's last name and the page number. You may have learned that in high school. It's not incorrect. It's just a different citation method. But we're using we're using MLA here, so we want to use MLA formatting. Just author last name, page number. Also note the terminating punctuation for the sentence, that means that the final punctuation for the sentence, comes after the citation. So just put in your head that the citation is part of the sentence. There are two exceptions to that. One of which is if you have a quotation like this one, and inside the quotation, the quote ends with either a question mark or an exclamation point, then you would include those punctuation marks inside the quotation mark. But then you would still put the terminating punctuation for the overall sentence at the end of the citation. Another thing to note here as well in this little 3-sentence example we're looking at, you'll notice the first citation up here just has the page number. Can anybody tell me the reason for that?
It's the same author, so you don't have to put it twice if it's the direct next quote.
That's right, but it actually comes before the one with the author's name. So why would it the first time appear with only the page number?
It says it in the sentence.
That's right. That's right. The sentence, in the very first sentence here, uses the author's name in the sentence itself. So in other words, you're attributing the information, in this case, the quotation, to the author in the sentence, which means in the citation, you need only put the page number. Wordsworth stated that romantic poetry was marked by a, quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, close quotation, open parenthesis, page number 263, close parenthesis, period. And you see in the third sentence here, they did the same thing. So once again, we only need the page number. What you see down here, Wordsworth, comma, William, period, lyrical ballads, period, Oxford UP, comma, 1967, period. This is what the works cited citation will look like. We'll get to that in a moment. So as we just discussed, if the essay provides a signal word or phrase, usually the author's last name, the citation does not need to also include that information. Humans have been described by Kenneth Burke as symbol-using animals. Since Kenneth Burke wrote it, his name is in the sentence. We need only include the page number at the end. And up here in blue, you see what would be the works cited citation for the source. What do you do when you have no known author? This is increasingly likely given a lot of the online sources that we may find, particularly websites. Even if you went to a, say, government website and you were pulling, let's say you're writing a research paper about, American GDP over the last 50 years or something, and you're on various government agency websites that have lots of information and data, but they're not going to have an author. It's not going to say who wrote it. What do? Well, instead of, in your in-text citation, instead of citing to the author's last name and the page number, you put the title of the source, or a short form of it if it's really long, and then the page number. So the example here, we see so many global warming hotspots in North America, likely because this region has, quote, more readily accessible climatic data and more comprehensive programs to monitor and study environmental change, close quotation, open parenthesis, and then we have in quotation marks, impact of global warming, 6, close paren, period. This tells us that when we look back in the work cited, we're going to be looking for impact of global warming instead of the author's last name to find this, the full citation for this source. And here it is. So this also shows us, this is what it would look like in the works cited, that the writer of this paper has actually included a short form of the title. The long title is The Impact of Global Warming in North America. But impact of global warming is sufficient enough to lead your reader to the appropriate source in the works cited. Okay, so several other types of in-text citations. What about works with multiple editions? So if it has a first edition, a third edition, a fifth edition, how do we know what you're citing to? Simple. Marx and Engels describe human history as marked by class struggles. 79, semicolon, chapter 1. So here you're adding whatever edition it is, plus whatever chapter it's in. What about having authors with the same last names? So the problem here would be that, let's say you have 3 different Millers that wrote 3 different articles. It's not going to be clear if you just put Miller 12 or Miller 15, which Miller you're referring to in your works cited. So in that case, you actually put the first initial of the author's first name along with the last name. And if by some strange coincidence, the first initial of their names was also the same, then you would probably just go ahead and write the whole first name. So Ruby Miller for one and Ron Miller for the other. So that's dealing with authors with the same last names. What about works by multiple authors? This is important because probably 98% of you are going to run into this in your research project. Write this down. List the last name of all authors if the work has up to 3 authors. So if it has 2 authors or 3 authors, you list all of their last names. Are you writing this down? Write this down. If the source has up to 3 authors, you list all of their last names. If the work has 4 or more authors, you will use what you see, this phrase you see in the second example here, et al, A-L, period. Et al means and all the others. So you see Smith et al argues that tougher gun control is not needed in the United States. Here, since they referred to the authors in the sentence, they need only put the page number, page 76. We see in the second example here, the authors state, so here the authors are not mentioned in the sentence by name, quote, tighter gun control in the United States erodes Second Amendment rights. So our citation here, in-text citation here, we'll read Smith et al. Period 76, which is the page number, close parenthesis, period. The bottom example here has, the source has 2 authors. 2016 study suggests that stricter gun control in the United States will significantly prevent accidental shootings. This is Strong and Ellis, 23. How would you format it if, let's say, I was the 3rd author on this source? It would be Strong, comma, Ellis, and Morris, 23. So if you had 3 authors here, it would be Strong, comma, Ellis, and Morris, and then the page number. Remember, if it has more than 3 authors, you use the phrase et al., which is Latin for and all the others. Anything below 4, list all their names. Questions about that? That's a big point, because there are, especially when you're looking at scholarly sources, so many scholarly sources are written by at least more than one person. All right, so here's another issue that can come up with in-text citations is how do you cite to multiple works by the same author? So a moment ago, we talked about what happens if you have 2 different authors, but who have the same last name. There could be confusion with just having Miller in a citation, so you put the first initial of their first name as well to differentiate which Miller you're referring to. But what happens if you have multiple works by the same author? And you know, this actually comes up a lot. A lot of times when you get into a particular area of scholarly research, there may only be a couple of people in the field who are really the foremost scholars in that area. And they may have published dozens and dozens of sources that are useful to you. I've had students, and in fact, I've read published works that may cite to 6 or 7 articles from the same person. So what do? Because if you just use the author's last name and the page number and all the in-text citations, again, it wouldn't be clear which article that is coming from. So the way that you account for that in your in-text citations is that you refer to the source by its title or a short form of its title instead of by the author's last name. As has been done here, Leitner has argued that computers are not useful tools for small children. So we see in the in-text citation here, instead of saying Leitner 38, it says in quotation marks, too soon, which is a short form of the title, and then the page number 38. And then we know that this next source also comes from Leitner, though he has acknowledged elsewhere that early exposure to computer games does not lead to better small motor skill development in a child's 2nd and 3rd year. And the title of that source was Hand-Eye Development on page 17. Another way you can do it is, as they have down here, visual studies, because it is such a new discipline, may be too easy. Here, they actually put the author's last name, then a comma, then the short form of the title, in quotation marks, and then the page number. And of course, the reason for the author's last name appearing here is because it doesn't appear in the sentence as it did in the example above. Questions about this? Multiple works by the same author? Gripping stuff, okay. These in-text citations are a little bit more, specific, but still important to know. What about multi-volume works? Well, you're always going to have to include chapter information and verse information. Whoops. Or at least the volume number and then the page numbers. So here we have volume 1, and then the page numbers 14 to 17. What about citing to the Bible or any other religious text? You're going to include whatever version you're looking at. So here, this is the New Jerusalem Bible. It could be New King James or Standard American Edition, whatever it may be. The book, in this case, Ezekiel. Chapter 1, verses 5 through 10. Again, you have to be asking yourself, how is the reader going to be able to go directly to what I'm quoting or raising here and be able to find it? No guesswork. And for religious texts, particularly Bibles, it's important to put the addition. Why? Because different translations say different things. The language may be a little different. Okay, this one's fun. Of course, there's a footnote with that, meaning fun for MLA citations. Okay, citing indirect sources. What does that mean? That means you're reading one source, and within that source, that writer is actually quoting another source. So the question is, which are you supposed to cite to? And the answer is, you cite the source that you are looking at. So Ravitch argues that high schools are pressured to act as, quote, social service centers, and they don't do that well, close quotation marks. The in-text citation here is QTD, which stands for quoted, period, quoted in Weissman 259. So look at how much information is just in this short sentence with this in-text citation. I know as a reader that to find this source, I'm going to go to the works cited of this page and I'm going to look up Weissman 259, page 259. And on page 259, I'm going to find a quote by somebody named Ravitch that says these words. Now, just as a quick research tip, if you start finding yourself reading one source and finding a lot of information that's quoted by somebody else or from another source, can you also go to that source and use it as another potential source for your research? You bet. In fact, I always like to say that when research starts getting a little incestuous, when you start seeing the same people and the same articles quoted over and over again, that's how you know you're in the hot zone. That's how you know you've really kind of hit the jackpot, because you're in the real fire of that conversation, whatever it is. Particularly in those fields or in a little niche of a field where you have maybe only a handful of people, maybe even one person who's sort of the foremost expert on a topic. The next one here is multiple citations to the same text. So the example here is Romeo and Juliet presents an opposition between two worlds, the world, quote, the world of the everyday and the world of romance, end quote. Although the two lovers are a part of the world of romance, their language of love nevertheless becomes, quote, fully responsive to the tang of actuality. The in-text citation here is Zender 138, 141. Somebody tell me, why has this been formatted like this? why don't we have an in-text citation after each of the sentences which has a quotation?
Is it because it's like not actually from the book Romeo and Juliet? Is it because it's like that?
No, it's not talking about, I mean, it doesn't aim to be quoting Romeo and Juliet specifically, right? I mean, it's somebody talking about Romeo and Juliet, but the citation for both sentences comes at the end of the second sentence with 2 different page numbers. Why?
Because they're using 2 quotes in the same paragraph by the same person.
That's right. And here, doing it this way stops us from having to read 2 different citations, right? These 2 sentences both come, or the source in both of these sentences comes from the same source. So this is, remember we talked about parallel structure? When you're writing a thesis, you discuss things in the order that they're raised in the thesis. The same is sort of true here. The citation, Zender 138, tells us that the first citation we see, the world of the everyday and the world of romance, comes from page 138. The second citation we see, fully responsive to the ting of actuality, comes from page 141. Would it be incorrect if you put Zender 138 at the end of the first sentence and then Zender 141, or even just 141 at the end of the second sentence? No, that would be fine as well. And that kind of speaks to what we said earlier, which is that sometimes there's more than one way to cite to something. This is really just up to you. Okay, pay particular attention to this. Works in time-based media. This is important because increasingly we rely on videos, films, documentaries, all different kinds of things as potential sources. And there's a way to cite those things too. In-text citation example here, Buffy's promise that, quote, there's not going to be any incidents like at my old school, end quote, is obviously not one on which she can follow through. The in-text citation here is hush in quotation marks, and then we see a timestamp. Can somebody tell me what hush is?
The name of the episode.
Correct. Hush is the title of an episode from the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The timestamp here tells us the exact hour, minute, and seconds that this quote is uttered. So even if, as you'll note, it's only 3 minutes in, seconds 16 through 17, you still include the 00 in the hour spot. So you have 00:03:16 to 17. And then this is what the works cited entry would look like. It would be alphabetized or begin with the episode title, followed by Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the name of the series. And then we get some creative information here, created by Josh Whedon, performance by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Season 4, episode 10, Mutant Enemy, which is the production company, 1999. And here, the season and episode number are kind of serving as the volume number, as would be with a print source, right? We have to know not just episode 10, but what season, because Buffy the Vampire Slayer was on for a long time. Good, questions about that? You could never just say Buffy the Vampire Slayer and then give the timestamp here. Why? Because there are, I don't know, 180, 200, however many episodes of the series. You would be throwing the reader into the dark as to where specifically to go and find this quote. So it has to be very specific. If you were citing a movie or a one-off documentary, it would be different. If we were doing a quote from, say, Call Me By Your Name, we would just have Call Me By Your Name and then the timestamp, wherever the characters say whatever quote it is you're speaking to. Good. This is important for in-text citations, sources without page numbers. This won't happen so much with scholarly sources. I would say 99.999% of scholarly sources have page numbers. But this is increasingly the case with sources that come from the internet. Particularly sources that may be really high quality sources and have a lot of good information that come from websites. So the example here, we see disability activism should work toward, quote, creating a habitable space for all beings. This comes from Garland Thompson. This is, and then the works cited entry here, Habitable Worlds, Critical Disability Studies Symposium. February 2016, Purdue University, Indiana. So this is actually an address. This is something that this was spoken at a symposium. So there'd be no page numbers for a kind of speech like this. One way that something like this may come up in your research project is, say, for example, you've chosen a topic that is in your major and you want to cite to information that one of your professors covered in a lecture. Can you do that? Sure, you absolutely can. The lecture would be cited to, much like this works cited entry here. You would ask your professor for the title of the lecture, or maybe it has one listed in the syllabus. You would quote the date for it. And your in-text citation would include your professor's last name. Obviously, there are no page numbers here because it's not printed. And there's no timestamp because it's not a video. Although if there was a video, you could cite to that too. Short prose quotations. This is essentially what you're already doing in your analysis essays. According to some, dreams express, quote, profound aspects of personality. This comes from Folks 184, though others disagree. Same idea here. If you include the author's name in the sentence, you don't have to put it in the in-text citation. According to Folks' study, dreams may express, quote, profound aspects of personality. And our in-text citation would just have 184. I think we've covered this. The next example is essentially a block quote, which we talked about back in our unit on personal writing, when you're writing your personal essays. Quoting more than 4 lines of prose requires that you create a block quote. Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration. Colon, and then we have a long section of text here directly from Wuthering Heights. And then on the next line of text, we receive the citation, Bronte 78. Quoting 1 to 3 lines of poetry. Again, we've talked about this before. You can indicate, as long as it's not going to cover more than 3 lines, you can just indicate it by slashes between the individual lines. And then the in-text citation includes the line numbers or the stanzas. as in the bottom example. So again, using block quotations for 3 or more lines of poetry, or sorry, this is not again, we haven't talked about this. So if you're using more than 3 lines of poetry, then you would use a block quotation. And we talked about this in the personal essay unit. If the poem is formatted in an unusual way, then you want to try to reproduce that unique formatting as much as possible. Sometimes poets use white space or unusual spacing to make a particular point in the poem. So you would want to try to replicate that as much as possible. This is important. Sometimes when you have a long quote, or when you have a quote that doesn't quite fit into the sentence you're trying to fit it into, you have to either add words or omit words from it. For adding words, the only kinds of words that you would want to add would be trying to clarify a vague term. So here in the example, you see Jan Harold Brundtland, in an essay on urban legends, states, quote, "Some individuals make a point of learning every rumor or tale." Now you can see in brackets here, after the word individuals, she has specified what individuals she's talking about, which are individuals who retell urban legends. So she's made that clarification by adding extra words in brackets. As for omitting words, you can use ellipses to take out words from a longer quote so that you're really just using the words that you need. Some individuals make a point of learning every recent rumor or tale, ... and in a short time, a lively exchange of details occurs. So this writer has cut this down a little bit. She didn't need all the stuff that came in. So you can delete with ellipses. You can add words with brackets if you need to make a clarification or specify something that taken out of context could be misleading. Any questions about that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was taught for omitting words that we had to put the brackets around the ellipses. Would that be incorrect? Or, because I've been doing that since, all in my writing, so I just wanted to know.
Right, so it's not that it's incorrect, it's that it's not MLA.
Okay.
That is a different citation style.
Mm-hmm.
MLA does not require that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Good question. Other questions about this? Okay, so that's the end of in-text citations. So now you're taking notes, right? So draw a little line and now write the works cited. So we covered basic guidelines of formatting a text, then we covered in-text citations, so the citations that you'll provide in the text itself. Now we're talking about the works cited. Every works cited entry has a list of works, and those works are listed with core elements provided in a specific order. The elements should always be listed in the order that they appear here on the left, and followed by the punctuation mark shown here. Now I'll note, not every source will have all of this information, but this includes just about everything that could possibly be in a citation. All right, so first is the author, last name, comma, first name, followed by a period. Then the title of the source, followed by a period. What they mean by the source is the direct thing that it comes from, right? So if you're reading an article from the New England Journal of Medicine, the title of the source is not the New England Journal of Medicine. It's the title of the article that you're reading inside the journal. The New England Journal of Medicine would be the next thing, which is the title of the container. By container, they mean the larger source that the article, essay, poem, short story, whatever the case may be, is included in. So title of source, followed by a period, then title of the container, followed by a comma. Then you would list other contributors if this is necessary. So does it have an editor? Is it translated from another language? If so, then you would need to include the names of the translators. As we saw in the media examples, this may also include the creator of a series or a particular actor or a particular director, if you wanted to highlight any of that information. The version, if that's relevant, the number and publisher, the publication date, and the location of publication. And note that the location can vary. Obviously, if it is a printed text, the location is going to be where it was printed. But what if you were citing to a painting that hangs in the Museum of Modern Art? The location would be New York. The publisher, which is number 7 here, would be Museum of Modern Art. Again, you have to ask yourself, how would my reader be able to find this information? Those are the basics. Obviously, first thing is the author. Begin the entry with the author's last name, comma, then the first name. What about authors, as we talked about with in-text citations? What if there's more than one author? Well, as we talked about with there being 4 or more authors, it would be, say, comma, Baron, comma, Naomi S. et al. So you would use the et al. Again. You wouldn't list all of those people. But if it's 1, 2, or 3, you do list all of their names. However, write this down and underline this. You must list the authors in the order they are listed in the source itself. You must list the authors in the order they are listed in the source itself. That's important because they were listed that way for a reason. Now, maybe the various writers agreed to just have their names listed alphabetically, but they may be listed in a particular order based on the amount or the size of their contribution. So any journalism majors in here, you'll notice that a lot of times in articles in major publications, writers will be listed in a particular order and it's not alphabetical. That usually has to do with the size of their contributions. Or maybe one of the writers is better known or more famous than the others, in which case they, for lack of a better term, get top billing. When you're looking at academic and research sources, usually the case, or often the case, not usually, often the case is that the principal researcher is billed first. Sometimes the names that follow might be research assistants or students who collaborated with the professor, with the researcher on it. So list them in the order that they are listed. If it has 2 names or 3 names, it would look like you would do it this way. Last name, comma, first name. But then the other researchers would just be listed normally. So it would be Baron, comma, Naomi S, comma, John Mitchell Morris, comma, and Alan Jacobs. So not all of their names would go last name, last name, comma, first name, only the first one listed. And that makes sense because the entry in your works cited is going to be alphabetized by by the first writer's last name. Any questions about any of that? All right, so the next thing is the title of the source. If you're just looking at a book or a website, that's just going to be the title of it, right? The book title, the website title, easy peasy. That's what's on top here, and that title should be italicized. But if you're looking at something from a periodical, which again includes journals, magazines, newspaper articles, television episodes, well, those aren't periodicals, but anything that has multiple parts, television episodes, songs, then the title of the source is going to go in quotation marks, and then the title of the container will belong in italics. As you can see here at the bottom, we have Goldman, comma, Ann. The title of the article is Questions of Transport, Reading Primo Levi, Reading Dante. That goes in quotation marks. This is from the Georgia Review. The Georgia Review is italicized, comma, volume number, comma, year, comma, pp, which means page to page. Page 69 to page 89. If you just have one page, then it would just be P period 69. Okay, title of container. If this is applicable, we just talked about this. The title of a container will be italicized. Other contributors. Other contributors are where works cited source, a works cited entry is kind of up to you and how and why you're using it. The main thing to note is that if you're looking at a work that's been edited heavily, so let's say you're looking at the works by, or the letters of Henry James, and somebody has edited them, that would be important. Probably the most common one is translated by. So anything that's been translated from another language into English, or from English into another language, you would need to write translated by and include that person's name. Again, they're using the television example here, the creator of a TV series, the actor. So if you have a direct quote that a character says, then you would need to quote the person who said it, the actor who said it. The quote that they had in the example we saw a few moments ago from Buffy the Vampire Slayer included a quote that Sarah Michelle Gellar, playing Buffy, said. That's why her name is listed here. So this is the other contributors. This is also where you would think about what particular performer or contributor to a work you may want to emphasize. So for example, if you're writing a research paper about a particular director, let's say you're writing about James Cameron, then you might, for every movie of his that you list, you would definitely want to emphasize the fact that it was directed by James Cameron. The next is the version. So if a source is listed as an edition or a version of a work, then you have to include that in your citation. We talked about this before. The Authorized King James Version, for example, here for the Bible. Or in the following example, the 7th edition of the Critical View. Look at this, the movie Blade Runner, the particular version that's being listed is the director's cut, which is of course different than, or maybe different than the cut that was released in movie theaters. If a source is part of a numbered sequence, such as a multi-volume book or journal with volume and issue numbers, those numbers must be listed in the citation too. Again, this just speaks to allowing your reader to be able to go directly to the source and find it without doing any work. In these examples we see here in the Naomi Barron source, volume 128, number 1. In the TV version from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, season 4, episode 10, and so on. So that's the number. And then the publisher. The publisher produces or distributes the source to the public. If there's more than one publisher and they're all relevant to your research, list them all, separated by a /. So here we have the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, as well as the website, Teeny, which is the, whatever the source is, .cmoa, which is Carnegie Museum of Art, and the website link, URL link. Okay, and then the publication date. What's important to note here is that if the publication has more than one publication date, you want to use the date that's most relevant to your use of it. Most often, that's probably going to be the most recent publication date, because maybe the information's been updated or changed. But you may also, it may be relevant in your research that you're actually noting the difference between something. So in one citation, you might be citing to an older version of it, and then in a later citation to a newer version of it to note how something had changed. And then the location. Here you want to be as specific as possible in identifying a work's location. For a book or a periodical entry, that's going to be the page number. When I find this entry, or when I find this source, tell me exactly what pages I need to go through. You see here, we have on Monday of last week, I believe this is a short story. We know exactly what pages we can find it on, page 74 to page 94. Below, we actually have the URL link. And in the example on the bottom, we have the title of a painting, the year, Museum of Modern Art, who is here serving as the publisher, and then the location in New York. As for locations, MLA lists the following things as being optional: the date of original publication, and the city of publication. I want you to include those things when relevant. And then also optional elements, they have URLs, a DIO, which is a digital object identifier. We'll talk more about that, I think a week from Monday when we have a librarian come to teach our class, and she'll teach you how to use the various databases available to you through the SUNY Purchase Library. So MLA lists these things as optional. I'm going to make these things required. I want you to list the URLs when you have them, a digital object identifier if you have it, or a specific link, because I think it just makes it easier for the reader to be able to find it. It'll make it especially easier for me to go and find the sources as I'm going through and evaluating your work and your research. If I have to hunt down the source, that's not a good sign, right? So in your notes, just write, include URLs, DOIs, and date of access when relevant. Okay. One quick last thing is that I want to show you here on the Purdue OWL website, this is where we were earlier at the beginning of class, you can actually find a sample works cited page. And I encourage you to look at this and note how it's formatted. Your works cited should begin at the top of a new page. It should not begin just below the end of your text. The whole thing should be works cited. Note, the words works cited at the top are not bold, they're not italicized, they're not underlined. Just works cited, and it must say works, plural, because you will have more than one source. Note the formatting. Along the left margin, we note that everything is alphabetized by the author's last names. And where there is no author, it's alphabetized by the first major word of the title. So you see several sources down here. We have a documentary called The Inconvenient Truth. Why is an inconvenient truth alphabetized after H? It's alphabetized by I, the first major word of the title. So we don't count words like a, the, an. So if you were citing to Tennessee Williams's play A Streetcar Named Desire, it would be alphabetized under S for streetcar, not A. Or for The Glass Menagerie, it would be alphabetized under G, not T. Of course, those things would really be alphabetized by W for Williams, but nonetheless. So alphabetized by the author's last names, and where there is no author, note here, you actually include that with 3 small dashes and a period where the author's name would have gone. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's not what's happening here. These 3 dashes indicate that the author is the same as above. So in this works cited, we have 2 works by William Nordhaus. The first one is After Kyoto. The second one is Global Warming Economics. The first entry is alphabetized by N, the author's last name. The second entry is alphabetized by G. So After Kyoto comes before Global Warming Economics. Note also that the first line of every works cited entry must begin on the far left margin. The second or any subsequent lines, as you see in multiple of these examples, is indented a ½ inch. And that's what makes it easy to tell where every source begins, because we can see it on the left margin. And then the second, third, fourth, however many lines that follow are indented a ½ inch. And earlier when I said that citation creators don't always get the formatting correct, this is what I'm referring to. When you actually put it into a Word document or a Google Doc, they may have the information correct, but you may have to manually fix the formatting yourself. So the major things to note here: works cited on the first line of a new page, no bold, no underline, no italics. All sources must be alphabetized by the author's last name. If there is no author, then by the first major word of the title. If you have more than one source, by the author, then the first source will come wherever it belongs alphabetically. And then even within that, the 2 different articles should be alphabetized by the first word of their title, which is why this After Kyoto article goes before the Global Warming Economics. important things to include. Notice that here they have all of the URLs where URLs are relevant. They have them here directly. We'd be able to click on them. We also have the access date. We know what date this writer accessed this information. Okay, good. Questions about any of that? I know that is a lot to put in your noggins. For your analysis essay, you should have two sources. What are they? What are the two sources you're going to be citing to in your analysis essays?
The two
The
books.
Yeah, the two plays, right?
Yeah.
Alphabetized by author's last name, Williams and Wilson. So they're both W, so you've got to go by, they both also have an I next. So then you have to go to the third letter. Guess what? They both also have an L next. So you have to go to the fourth letter, which in Williams is L, so Williams will come before Wilson. Fourth letter of Wilson is an S. Do these things matter? Yes. Will I dock you points if you don't do it correctly? Yes. You should have two sources. You should also be using in-text citations. So this will be good practice for your research paper. It should be really straightforward in the analysis essay. Your in-text citations are either going to be open parenthesis, Williams, page number, close parenthesis, or open parenthesis, Wilson, page number, close parenthesis. Or if you've cited to Williams several times in a row and it's clear from the context of the paragraph what author you're talking about and what play, then you can just include the page numbers after a certain point. But you must include the in-text citations. That's the last little bit that we're adding onto that assignment. Okay, good. Any questions about any of this? I'll post the recording for today's class as well as the PowerPoint presentation for today's class. I urge you to go back through it, look at it, try to re-cement some of the ideas that we've talked about. And spend 15 minutes this weekend on the Purdue OWL website. Just click on all those different little categories so you can kind of familiarize yourself with, oh, this is where this information is, this is how I would do this is how I would do that. Just know where everything is when you need to find it. Okay, if that's it, then we'll sign off here. I'm going to begin reviewing your class's essays today. You'll get them back from me over the course of either today, tomorrow, or Saturday. If you have not yet turned in a draft, please do so immediately. Obviously, drafts that come in late will get reviewed late, but that is that. If you have questions, come and see me in office hours. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday. All right, take care. Thank you all.